David, you ready?
So it has to.
Yes. Okay, so we have had a little bit of a snafu here in Kaiby School District because we have had a couple of members who've been sidetracked. Not of their own volition, but because of the IT snafu. So we've got one that's currently on a plane to San Francisco and one who's waiting for a plane in Philadelphia. So this evening, we are not going to do any formal business or take any action by the board. However, because we have advertised this as a public hearing for purpose of giving the board information about the 24-25 school year budget, we're going to go ahead with the public hearing. We will not take any action to adopt the budget this evening. We will schedule another meeting when we can get a quorum of people who will be able to sign the resolution adopting the final budget. So with that, we will not formally open, but we will stand and do the Pledge of Allegiance. We will just not have a call to order of a formal meeting. So if you wouldn't mind, please stand.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I gotta tell you, it was a really cool agenda, though. Yes, it was a full agenda, so we will be taking care of a majority of these agenda items from the consent agenda on down, but because we are not in a formal meeting now, there is no need to go to a recess. We're going to go straight into our public hearing, which I will turn over to Mr. Rob to go ahead and take us through the 24-25 budget. Yeah, so Drew, go ahead.
Perfect. Okay, so we're gonna start with the 23-24 budget extension that I'm asking for, and then we will go into the 24-25 budget overview. So start things off, David, next slide, please. Thank you. So this year, we're gonna ask for $325,000 for an extension for the 23-24 budget for the general fund. This additional capacity will allow the district to cover any unexpected expenses. As we know, we have aging buildings and a couple of HVAC units go out at any point and it can be costly. One thing I do want to note is just because we're asking for the extension does not mean we plan on spending it all. And this is something we've done every year. Most districts do them. It's not anything new. Next slide. So here's an overview of kind of where the general fund is at this point. So our budget expenditures for the year were $24,003,442. And then I've got our year-to-date up there, which gives us our capacity remaining at 1.8 million. And then I looked at what expenses we have already encumbered, which is like our payroll costs for the remainder of the year, any AP stuff that we have already costed out. And to get a remaining capacity of 127,000. But further, we needed to look at what were our average expenditures for the year per month, which was just over 2 million. And then I kind of looked at what the difference of that was to what the capacity we have remaining. So to be able to keep up with our monthly expenditures, we would need an extension of 138,000. But I'm asking for 325 just to be on the safe side. As you guys know, sometimes to start the year, we have some costs that come up, training costs, supplies, all that. And some of that will be rolled forward, some of that will be costed in this year. So I don't see us even coming close to using all that, but I like to have the capacity to be able to work and not bring too much. So next slide. And then obviously the biggest thing is, what does this do to our fund balance? So our current June fund balance was 185,000, which is low. which is typical for districts this time of year with May and June being the lowest 2 months if you're fortunate. So you don't get much money in those 2 months. I added in what our projected revenue is. And then kind of our remaining expenses. So on the left, I did kind of what we're thinking we're gonna spend around. And then on the right is kind of a worst case scenario. Let's say we use all of that extension. And so on the left, we come out with a fund balance of 5.4%. And on the right would be 4.8%. So I just kind of want to give you guys that overview of kind of what that would look like. Are there any questions? Next slide. Okay. I mean, that's the extension piece, so
5.8 or 5.4.
yes. Okay. There's no other questions. I will go ahead and move into the 24-25 budget. So, as you guys know, enrollment drives everything. I do want to point out that the funding model has changed for enrollment as of the 23-24 school year. So when you look at this chart, you can see from 22-23 backwards that the kinder numbers are a lot higher. That is because TK used to be into this enrollment count. It is now split out into its own funding model, its own program. So that's not inclusive of that. But in talking with Mr. Peterson, we lost kids this year. So we wanted to be conservative in our budget again and project to lose kids and hope that we actually don't. And then that would in turn bring in some additional money that we're not counting on. But in case we do, we want to be prepared and be able to budget for that. Next slide.
Those were all actual, except the last column.
No, those are all projected. And here's our actuals. So this is just showing the enrollment projection versus actual. So kind of how do we do essentially? As you can see, it's kind of all over the board the last 10 years. It's tough to predict. Coming out of COVID, especially, we budgeted really low in 21-22 and came in way above. This year, we honestly, I thought we budgeted pretty conservatively compared to the actuals of the year before, but we lost even more. So part of that is we have a few more kids going to TriTech and exploring some of those opportunities and running START, which is great. But it does drop our FTE number just a little bit. So we're going conservative again. Hopefully we're a little closer this time. But like you can see, it's really tough to predict, especially coming out of COVID. And all schools across the state are experiencing these kind of abnormalities in their enrollment. So
Yeah, I want to throw in there in agreement with Drew, there was a point in time when there were districts locally that could consistently get within 1 or 2 kids on their projection. And right now, as I talk to the other superintendents, all of the mechanisms that they used to try and project have gone out the window. There's just too many variables. And so most are trying to budget at a lower number and much more conservative so that they don't get stuck as some other districts have with a much higher projection than they actually have.
Next slide. So here's just a summary of each fund and where we're budgeting for the year. So the top, we kind of have what our projected fund balance is from the 23-24 school year. And then we roll over and do our revenue, our expenses, and then a couple funds we have transfers, which I'll get to, and then just showing what the excess of revenue expenditures are. So whether you're gonna actually come out ahead or you're gonna come out under and increase or decrease your fund balance. So for the general fund, we have a transfer of $50,000 there, which is to the capital projects fund in case of we need, some kind of equipment repair or building repair or something of that nature. I like to build something in there each year. This year, just with where our fund balance is, we're not meeting the 6%. I didn't want to budget too much, but I did want to build a little something in there. Going to ASB, they always tend to budget way higher than they probably need to, but they like to give themselves capacity. I would say they probably spend about half of what they budgeted here. But again, they like to do their thing and at least project high so they can do all kinds of activities and spending and whatnot. Going to debt service. Debt service is very quiet compared to prior years now that our bond has matured. So we have $100,000 in expenditures where in the past we've had closer to 1,600,000, somewhere in there. Kind of based on the year. With the bond maturing, we just have our buses that we're paying for through that fund. So we transfer money from the transportation fund, which is that 100,000, and we bring it over to debt service and pay those. Those non-voted bonds. Going to capital projects, I have some money coming in for Mr. Lake has a grant for equipment. And some of it is going to be coming in here at the end of this year. But also we have some of it that's going to roll to next year. So that's kind of the money there and the expenditures for that one. And then obviously the transfer if needed.
So
Question?
Capital projects, you have 7,700, but what was the amount for last year or for this current year? Was there, I mean, that's what's left over,
So that's what we're projecting to have at year end. Yes.
but what was the total budget fund? I mean, well, how much did you expenditure on capital projects this year?
I'd have to look at how much we spent this year. I don't think we spent anything out of this year.
Okay,
Yeah, we didn't do any transfers or anything, so I don't believe we spent anything.
you
So
didn't buy any air conditioners or?
Mr. Lake has a grant that that we just are going to be purchasing a couple things at the end of the year. So it's real minor, probably 10,000-15,000 of this grant, so.
So you figure 193 or 190 will.
Yeah, it'll more than cover it. Yep. And then, another
If
question?
you have to, you might borrow from that one.
Yes. But hopefully we don't have to. And then moving to transportation fund. This year we were able to purchase 3 buses, 2 of our standard fleet, and then we ended up getting another special education bus, which was very much needed. So I budgeted for another bus to be bought. I'm gonna work with Mr. Crago and see where we're at. We had a couple come off the depreciation schedule, but I think we might be able to get by without getting one this year, but I at least want to give us the capacity to spend if we need to. Our fleet's in a much better spot than it was a couple years ago, so. Next slide. Then this is a comparison of budgeted amounts for the revenue from this year to or from 23-24 to 24-25, and just showing kind of the change. As I kind of discussed in some of our debt service or capital projects, some of these funds, they're quite a bit of change from this last year. Last couple of years, a lot of it has to do with the bond maturing. We're not buying as many buses as we have in the past. And then in the general fund, it's a little bit of a change, but a lot of our expenditure increase is between insurance and then obviously we have payroll costs too. But insurance for the district is increasing significantly, which all schools are feeling. We got a notice saying up to 30% increase again this next year. So we're taking it just over $500,000 for insurance, where when I started, it was half of that amount. So it's a real problem right now. But it's something we have to keep in mind when we budget each year, so, and go to negotiations. Next slide. So this slide is just a revenue breakdown, kind of showing where our dollars come from. As you guys know, majority of our dollars come from the state, general purpose and special purpose. And then we have federal dollars as well. This is a lower amount than in the past. 23-24 was the last year to spend our ESSER money. So that's money we do not have going forward, which I feel like we did a good job of coming off of those ESSER dollars this last couple of years and really being strategic in spending them. So, and then another good portion of our dollars come from our local taxes. So we want to thank our voters for getting out and helping us with that. As we have full levy through the 25 school year. Next slide. So this slide just kind of breaks down our categories. What does this money actually go towards? So for our levy, Levy dollars help with athletics, extracurriculars, music, arts, facilities maintenance, safety. For our non-tax dollars, this comes from testing fees, investment earnings. Food service meals that get bought. For the general purpose, this is our apportionment dollars, as I discussed, it's our largest one, each month. And then for your special purpose, that's more your programs, your bilinguals, your high cap, LAP. And then federal special purpose or Title I and migrant, as well as our ESSER funding, which was so. Next slide. And then here's an expenditure breakdown. Obviously, instruction, that's where we should be spending our dollars, so it helps best our kids. And then for support services have really grown in cost the last couple years. Since coming out of COVID, our kids are experiencing needing more services, different types of services, which they're not cheap, but they're necessary. So we've seen that category really increase on us, but it's something that we know we need to provide, we can budget for, we can plan for. I think, yeah, it's gonna continue that way for now, so. Next slide. So then this just kind of breaks down what falls in each category. I'm not really think I need to go through each of these. So let's just go to the next slide. When we look at the budget, I like to look at what percentage of our budget is salary and benefit related. This kind of tells you how much of the remainder of the budget you have to work with to be able to support our kids and our staff and really help our kids get the best education possible. For us this year, it's going to be right about 82% is salary and benefits that we're budgeting. In the past, we've been really close in that percentage. Most districts fall between the 80 and 83%. You start getting closer to 85, 86, and that's where the trouble starts, in my opinion, because it really squeezes down what you can do and the opportunities you can provide. So I feel pretty good with this number. But yeah, we'll keep monitoring it. We'll go from there. Next slide. This is our yearly MSOC disclosure. So I kind of changed how this one looks this year. I kind of found this chart and I think it's a lot easier to kind of understand. So each year the state gives us dollars to support our supplies, our services, professional development, everything that goes back to helping our kids out of basic ed and our support services. So this year we're going to projected to bring in 1.8 million in MSOCs, which is good. It's a little less, it's about what we got last year, right about the same. And then we are projecting to spend actually 2.3 million. So they want you to disclose how much you're going to be spending and just making sure you're actually spending it on what you need to be. This goes back to we're higher because of the services. I mean, majority of that cost is in service dollars. So we're putting that back into our kids and assisting with their learning. Next slide. So each year we kind of want to go through what legislative impacts were made. This year, salary increase was 3.7% of basic ed staff that they're funding us. But they only funded the MSOC increase of 1.9%. So while our services and stuff go up at a higher rate, they're only providing a chunk of an increase to us. So we have to make up the difference elsewhere, program dollars, et cetera. Also want to point out insurance costs has increased on the employer side from 1,100 to 1,178. Pretty standard. It's gone up right about 78, 80 bucks a year the last couple of years. And then the special education funding cap has increased from 15% to 16%. So based on how many special education students you have, if you're over the 16% enrollment cap, you're only getting funded this last year for 15% of those. This year, you'll get to 16, so you get a little extra funding. For us, it doesn't do anything. We're not over the 15% threshold. And then as we touched on, first year no ESSER funding. So we'll have to fund summer school differently. We'll go back, probably look at the old model of going LAP and title dollars, kind of just split costing it out. So we can still give those opportunities to our kids. Next slide. Lastly, the 4-year projection. So this is probably one of the toughest things I think about the budget. I pulled the last couple that I did when I was doing this one this year, and it was difficult. Things change year to year, not only in the legislators, but just the needs of the district. Based on COVID, what kids we have enrollment. Maybe we get a couple new kids to the district and they require a little more assistance with things. Or we graduate out a couple kids that we didn't have. So the needs change year to year, so it's hard to project out 4 years from now, enrollment, money, how many staff we're gonna have. So we kind of just do our best, and when we look at this and try to come up with a conservative approach for all the years, knowing that things are gonna change year to year, so we can adjust. We're gonna have our full levy, as I touched on, through 2025, and then we're gonna look for a continuation of levy rate. And then we kind of talked on the bus piece. We've got 3 buses this year, planning to purchase a couple in the next couple of years. David, can you switch over to the other document, please? Thank you. So this is the 4-year projection. So last year I clipped it into my PowerPoint and it was really hard to read. So I sent it to David and I said, hey, can you just have this up there? So I just kind of went through and I projected enrollment out for the next 4 years. The 24-25 category doesn't come up because we haven't finalized things in the system. So once we get everything finalized, the 24-25 from the budget will roll into here. So we kind of went conservative again with the enrollment. Next year be 1278, and then 1284, and then 1273. So again, just kind of hanging low on that. We know that there's not going to be an influx 50-60 kids. So I kind of want to be conservative. And then we budget out expenditures and whatnot accordingly. So I kind of just wanted to show you this page. I have the whole document here if anybody needs to see it. But I think you guys have seen it as well. So it just kind of goes through each fund and has the expenditures and whatnot for each year. Any questions? That's the end of my presentation. So.
When you say insurance 1,100, is that per head? That's how they charge it?
What's that?
Insurance was
Yes.
1,100 per student?
No, it's for staff.
Oh,
For staff, yeah. Are there any other public comments? Do you have any other questions? Okay. Do you guys have anything for me? Yeah, that's 4-year projections, one of the hardest things to do. So I just don't, things change year to year so much that
Well,
stuff.
and I assume with everything being built, we're obviously going. There's gonna be more kids, right?
I'm hoping. I'm really hoping, yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's tough to say what the legislators are gonna do year to year with increases and whatnot, and then, yeah, what does that do to our funding each year? So we kind of just do our best on what we're given and go from there, so.
what was this year's actual? 1310? Is that what we said?
Yeah, 1310 was our average for the year, so.
No. No, nice job. I think the main thing is as far as the takeaway goes, you know, moving forward, I think we're in as good a financial shape right now as we have been in a while. We simply need to double down and make sure that our expenditures are justified, our expenditures are on point. You know, this coming fall, we're gonna start having discussions around levy renewal and when we're going to be putting out for our next levy election. So those are all things that are in the works. So I think it's even though I think we're in a good spot, it's not the time to get loosey-goosey. We're still gonna be right on top of things. So
I'm glad to see you put money in capital projects, so Reed can plan some door replacements or
Yes,
air conditioners or whatever he might need to do, windows, I don't know what, but.
Yep.
You know, he has the money to work with.
exactly.
Okay, well, that will end our public hearing on our budget. And then, we're gonna go ahead and we will reschedule a time for our board members to come back to take action on both of the pieces to do business, the resolution for the budget extension and the resolution adopting the 24-25 budget. And then we'll take care of the other action items that are on there as well. So I feel like at this point, our hearing is over and we'll go ahead and make sure and get out some agenda, a revised agenda and a date and time to everybody when we're able to get everybody together again.
All right, thank you.
Thanks for coming.
Yeah.